Welcome to our snowy. Well, it's not snowy on this interview, but it is snowy every place else. Our snowy version of Golden Black Live, February 4th edition. Rob Hummel will be our guest in segment one. Want to thank our sponsors, Triple X on the hill, but on the level at Purdue Tradition since 1929. Rob's been there a time or two, I'm guessing, over his life. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's big day, stay at HDI tonight. And of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com and the good folks at WLFI for making this happen. You grew up in the region in Valparaiso, lake effect snow and all that kind of stuff is a part of your childhood. And yet you had a harrowing, or at least an experience where you were able to drive from to get to Illinois for a game this week. But this weather stuff is part of the deal anymore with college basketball. Guys just have to get used to it. Purdue's still trying to get home from its game against Minnesota as well.
Yeah, it's certainly a part of it. Growing up in Porter County, we don't get as much lake effect, I would say, as LaPorte County or even whatever county South Bend is in. They really get hammered, like LaPorte, Michigan City, into South Bend. We would get some, and I will say growing up, like Valpo was one of those schools where it was like everybody would cancel and somehow Valpo would be like, no, we're still doing school. So we had a few snow days, but not as many as I feel like other people did. I remember I want to say the year I sat out, we got snowed in at Wisconsin. And I will say it is way more fun when you win. we lost. So it wasn't as much fun because of the fact that we lost and we were stuck in the hotel for only a night. This is pretty crazy that Purdue is now going on their second day of not being home. But you're right, it is kind of a part of it, and everybody deals with it, whether it's the referees, teams, announcers. It took me 4 hours and 20 minutes to drive from Chicago to Champaign the other day for the Illinois-Wisconsin. I was lucky that it was an 8 o'clock start. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have made it. And I was also lucky that my flight left from D.C. at 6 a.m. Because every other one got canceled after that. So.
Yeah, interesting. It's part of the deal and how you adjust to it. It is interesting that Purdue will speak about that victory, so at least they feel a little bit better about themselves after the game at Minnesota. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it because you had a game right after with Wisconsin and Illinois, but Purdue seems to be in a good place right now. I mean, obviously, this is a rough and tumble Big Ten. Purdue has taken a couple lumps in the league, 3 of them, I guess, to be exact. But give me your assessment of what you're seeing out of Purdue right now and what it'll have to do tomorrow when Michigan comes calling to Mackey Arena.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Purdue is in a good place right now. I didn't get to watch the Minnesota-Purdue game yet. I will, because I'll be at Mackey on Tuesday for the Illinois game. But I do think that the point guard play has gotten better. Eric Hunter is playing really well and confident. And I just still look at Purdue as a team that has so many quality pieces. And yes, there's been some slip ups, but I think when you look around the conference, that's been everybody. It's I think by the eye test, Purdue is the best team in the Big Ten. And I think Illinois is second. But then you look at like the conference and results, and it's like, well, Wisconsin beat Purdue at Purdue, and Illinois beat Wisconsin, and Illinois beat Michigan State, but Michigan State beat Wisconsin. I mean, like, it's very intertwined to where you're like, I'm not sure from a resume standpoint who's in the greatest place to win the league. It's still very wide open to me. Purdue's right there, even with suffering some, I think, disappointing losses just because of the fact that you led, and whether that's Rutgers, Indiana, some of those games where you're up and you feel like you just sort of let these slip away. But I think that if you're Matt Painter or you're the guys on the team, you feel really good about where you're at and where this team is. What are they? Are they 7-3, 8-3?
8-3, right?
8-3. Yeah, I mean it's very possible that 5 losses could win the league this year. I don't think that's out of the question at all.
Obviously you played in a competitive time, won a Big Ten championship and a tournament championship, but also Michigan State is Michigan State. Nobody seems to give them, it's just interesting. And maybe it's just my view. Nobody seems to give them much credit because they don't have maybe the superstars that the Spartans typically have. from what you've seen of Michigan State, what is making them be at the level that they've been at so far this year, and yet everybody seems to discount them?
Yeah, you're totally right. I don't think that they have an alpha dog, and people coming into the year thought it might be Max Christie, and he's had moments of being really good, but he's also been inconsistent as a freshman because you're counting on him to play such a crazy high role. You see him go for 16 on an efficient shooting night against Michigan, and then you see Maryland, and he's, 6 or 7 points and doesn't impact the game in that fashion. I think they're certainly well coached. They're coached by a guy who's won 1 million college basketball games. They do the things that they've always done pretty well, and they really run, and they have the ability to crush on the glass. I think Tom Izzo's a little bit disappointed in some of their defensive rebounding. Northwestern is like 2 games. Northwestern really got them on the offensive glass, and that's not something that you'd say very often about Northwestern teams. That's never been their strength. So I think that they do those 2 things always: offensive rebound and run. And they have a bunch of good players. They're not. I don't think they have the great one, but Gabe Brown's a good Big Ten player. I think Marcus Bingham is having a nice year. He was second in blocks. I want to say now he's leading the league in block shots. Malik Hall has come on as maybe the guy that becomes that alpha. I wouldn't crown him as that yet, but they have good pieces. Their point guard play has been up and down, like a lot of people in the league. But I do think that at the end of the day, they found ways to win, and they're right in the thick of this thing too.
Yeah. Going to be an interesting stretch run. It'll be fun for you because you'll be in the thick of it, watching it all transpire. Now, the Rob Hummel Roadshow is pretty incredible. I wouldn't even know where you're doing Bulls games. You've been filling those in. I know on Twitter you're still harnessing your inner Michael Jordan. What's that like for you, just to have that opportunity growing up in that? And of course you have to do that. You have to do that kind of with Purdue because you're doing a Bulls home broadcast, so maybe a little bit different. But tell us about what that's been like. And you've got a game tonight, in Indianapolis with the Pacers, but then also before you go to Indiana tomorrow for the Indiana-Illinois game.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really cool. I love college basketball, and I would hope I never leave that field. As long as I'm doing games, because I really enjoy the environments and the pageantry and the rivalries. But then I think when you watch the NBA, and I knew this because I played there and I saw it for 2 years, but it is like a different level of play. You're talking about from the athlete's perspective, from a skill set perspective. I can't believe that people will watch NBA basketball. And now, look, I get it. There's times where it's 4 games in 5 nights. There's games where teams just don't have it because of the travel and how intense it can be. But to say you think the NBA is bad basketball, I just I do not comprehend how you can make that statement, because I just am like, look at how good these dudes are. The thought that the NBA teams don't play defense, to me, that just means you don't actually watch or understand. I think it's a lazy take. But to get to do the Bulls games, I grew up a diehard Jordan, Pippen, Rodman fan, and basically what is the Chicagoland area. We're only 15 minutes away. I was lucky as a kid. I got to see Jordan play 2 or 3 times. So it was what we did. I know my dad would make a fire, and we had a Little Tykes basketball hoop, and we would I'd watch the Bulls game and shoot around on that as a kid. It was an every night type thing. But it's been really cool. I've done them with mostly Adam Amin, who is a Chicago guy himself. And it's, you're on the plane and Bill Wennington's right in front of you telling you Michael Jordan stories. And it's pretty cool. I've been really lucky that I've had really good games. I mean, I did the Lakers game, which I actually thought I might play in. Which is, I thought because of COVID, I thought I could get called up, which is pretty. So the way it happened was, I'm doing the game. It's my first Bulls game. I'm filling in because Bill Wennington had COVID. So my first 2 were on radio, and Drew Anthrop, he texts me the morning of, and he's like, "Hey, do you think you could play tonight?" And I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, I didn't think he was being serious. You're an idiot.
Hell,
And
I'm
he's
sure
like,
you're being serious, but go ahead.
and he's like, no, I'm actually serious. Like we've had a meeting and we your name was brought up. And I want to say that the Windy City Bulls G League team was out of, they weren't in Chicago.
Yeah.
So they were having coaches test positive for COVID. And they were concerned if the players started, in order to play, they would have to sign some replacement guys. So he said, we literally just talked about you as a guy that could get brought in. So I hadn't played basketball in like, let's see, since October. Like it's been a long time since I've been, and that's like rec league, playing with guys like Sean Marion, who's 45, and some random Brandon Bracey, who played in the NBA for a little bit, but then played overseas. And it's just it's like old man pickup pretty much, run up and down on a short court. And I was like, I haven't been in the NBA since 2016. So, I mean, you couldn't say no to it, and it didn't end up materializing. And I do think from talking to him afterwards that he was serious that if players started getting chopped for COVID, I would have probably gotten a 10-day contract, or not probably, but could have gotten a 10-day contract. So can you imagine being like, hey, sorry, Bulls, I can't announce the game on radio tonight because I'm actually going to play on the other team. So it's been a wild deal. It's been really cool. I've had a couple of game winners. I did the game in Indianapolis where DeMar DeRozan made a one-legged shot to win the game. And then I was the next night in DC where he hit another one in the corner to win the game. And last night was really good too. The Bulls made a bucket with 10 seconds to go to take the lead, and then Toronto scored almost at the buzzer, and the Bulls lost in overtime. But I've been lucky that these games have been competitive, and the Bulls are one of the best teams in the NBA, so it's been fun to watch them get to play.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I think you could suit up and do just fine. So,
can you imagine being like, "Hey, go out there and try to switch on to Zach LaVine"?
Yeah,
haven't gotten in a stance like that in quite some time, but just good luck.
Yeah, that 10-day contract might be a little higher pay grade than what you're doing right now, even though it can't be all that bad.
No, it's not that bad, but it would be a major raise. I think a 10-day contract, like, I was talking to Etwan Moore. I was able to see him because I was in Orlando last week.
Yeah.
Because I did a game down there, and we had dinner afterwards, and we were talking about 10 days and talking about how if you've got the vet maximum, which he now has, but 10 days is like $240,000. And I don't have that tenure, I'm only 2 years in. So it wouldn't be that much for me. But yeah, if you've played a long time and you end up getting a 10-day, it's a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, that is my litmus test. So couldn't agree with you more about basketball. You can instantly tell if somebody really understands basketball if they say the NBA isn't any good.
Yeah,
I mean, and I don't appreciate it either because I don't watch it on a daily basis. But when you do see it in person, even it is extremely impressive, the skill level of these guys up and down the line. All right, Rob Hummel, media career has also been fun because you've obviously enjoyed doing the games. You got the Goodman and Hummel podcast, so you're looking at things from a national perspective too. Everybody at Purdue wants to end the 42-year drought in the Final Four, but you look at the landscape of college basketball, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but and even if you said, "Oh, Purdue," I guarantee Purdue can make it. Well, you know how the NCAA tournament goes.
No, it's a crapshoot, right?
It is a crapshoot. But what are some of the teams that really impress you? That really, I watched a little bit of UCLA, Arizona last night. Even though UCLA didn't play well in the first half, I like them in terms of talent. Totally. Who are some of the other teams that really jump out at you that may not be on the radar at the highest level at this point?
Yeah, I'll say Arizona just because I don't think people see them all that much in the Midwest and East Coast. I saw them over Thanksgiving out in Vegas. I had them against Michigan, and I was like, I mean, these guys are enormous. They got a huge lineup. They block shots, they turn you over, they play super fast. They can really shoot it. Tommy Lloyd plays a fun brand of basketball. So I'll put them in there. It's hard when you say under the radar teams. I know Marquette has had a heck of a season. I've watched a little bit of them. I've seen where some people have said they think that they could be kind of a dark horse team to make the Final Four. I think Illinois has a great chance. Purdue. Those aren't under the radar teams by any means.
Yeah,
but
I know.
I think Illinois is a team that's intriguing to me because of the fact that they just have had. I think they've had 9 different starting lineups. Yeah. Because of the fact that, Kofi Coburn has a concussion, or he's suspended the first 3 games, or Curbelo in his absence, or some of the illness they've dealt with, and everybody's dealt with that to some extent with COVID. But it seems like they've had an excessive amount of guys in and out of the lineup. Who else could I throw in there? I think it's wide open. I think Kentucky is really good. I think it's hard to even say. UCLA is still just so talented. Texas Tech is a team that I think has flown under the radar, and maybe not so much now after the national exposure from the beard and stuff. Yeah. But I think they guard you. Mark Adams is a really good coach. The podcast has been good for me though, just because of the fact that last year I did a lot of Big 12 and Big 10, and this year it's been a couple random American games and all Big 10. And that's just because of some personnel changes at ESPN, which in a way I like because I love the Big 10, but in a way I really like doing the Big 12 because it got you out to some other places and it lets you see some other teams. And I think if you do one league, you can really get tunnel visioned into that conference. So like if I was to fill out a bracket right now, I'd probably have like 7 Big 10 teams in the Elite 8 or something stupid like that. Because I've seen them so much, you're just like, well, they're really good. They're really good. Whereas it was nice to get to some of those other schools and see Kansas in person and see Baylor. I'm glad I'm getting I had my schedule got changed around for ESPN a little bit here next week. So I'm gonna see Gonzaga. I got moved from a game and I'll get to see them in person at Pepperdine, which is if you're gonna go to the West Coast Conference, why not see a game in Malibu? So
have you ever been there?
I've been to Malibu. I have not been to Pepperdine's
campus.
Gym. No, I haven't. I know it's right on the beach.
Oh, it is. I have been on the campus on a family trip one time. I stood at the top of the parking garage and told my kids if I could just stay at the top of the parking garage, I would go to school here. So
it's beautiful.
It is incredible. All right, one interesting thing, and we'll let you go here, but I think one thing you hit on that's interesting. The Big Ten obviously struggled in the NCAA tournament last year. We've talked about how it's a crapshoot, and it is, and Purdue fans want to have that guarantee that they're going to get there. This team is good enough to get there, but talk about that in terms of seeing just Big Ten teams, and yet Auburn, Kentucky, that one bit of athleticism. Is the Big Ten good, and from your standpoint, is that athletic difference a difference maker in the NCAA tournament, or is that really more not necessarily reality that the Big Ten is not quite as strong athletically as some of these other conferences?
That might be part of it. There's a lot of things that go into that. Matchups are huge. How do you handle if you're a team that's bad against the press and you draw a team like West Virginia a couple of years ago, you'd be like, well, this is a horrible matchup for us.
Yeah.
I think the officiating comes into play because the Big Ten is reffed a certain way. And I remember my sophomore year, we played Washington and Portland, and it was like a road game. And we had 2 refs that I have no idea who they were. And we had Tom O'Neill, had been a Big Ten ref forever. And there was a block charge call late in the game that went our way, and it was Tom's call. And thank God it was. And it's just like, and it's not because guys are more familiar with you or because they're going to help their conference out. I think it's more of a stylistic thing. Tom has seen the kind of the physicality of the league. And if those other 2 guys are Pac-12 officials or, let's say ACC officials or Big East or whatever, it's a different brand of basketball, I would say. So I think you can kind of run into that where guys get in foul trouble. Injuries, as Purdue fans know, are a big part. The Isaac Haas team gets derailed. Our team gets a little bit derailed. And even just, some of it's just you run into the wrong team at the wrong time. Our team the year I set out was playing really good basketball. And we ran into VCU, who was playing great basketball. And I've seen some of those guys' careers at VCU go on, and it's not like they've got 4 dudes in the NBA. I mean, we put two of those guys from our team in that game played in the NBA. And I'm thinking from that VCU team, I don't think any of them did. Maybe one of their Troy Daniels might have been on that team, and he might have been, but he was coming off the bench. So it's not like their talent was crazy. They were just kind of a team of destiny. You know, they're playing great. They almost didn't make the tournament. They played their way in. So there's a lot of things, and the athleticism stuff is part of matchups. I think if you run into a team like an Auburn, who's really, I didn't talk about them. They're not a dark horse, I guess. So,
no, they're not.
But they've got such talent, and the way that Bruce Pearl has them play every night on a night-to-night basis. Then you throw in the fact that you've got maybe the number 1 pick in the draft and an elite shot blocker, and that would be a matchup where you're like, all right, they've got some dudes. You know, that's a tough deal. Hopefully, you don't see them until an Elite 8, Final 4 type setting because of the talent they have. But there's a lot that goes into it. Athleticism plays a part, but I think there's a lot of other things too that you have to look at.
Yeah, there's no question. And we didn't get into half of my questions, but our time is running out.
You can keep going. We got another. We can go another 10 minutes.
I want to ask you about Purdue's NBA potential, and not that they're all, 2 of them in all likelihood are going this year with Travion Williams and Jaden Ivey, but also Zach Edey. Just give an evaluation from watching those guys. Jaden Ivey's really, really good. That's an understatement. But tell me what you see from those guys, and maybe what you might see at the next level for them, and from their perspectives.
Yeah. Well, Jaden, I think he's going to be picked in the top 10. I'd be shocked if he's not. From an athleticism standpoint, he looks like those dudes last night. That's the way he moves. And I think when you watch him, he moves different than pretty much everybody else on the court when you're watching a Purdue game. He's just special in that regard. In transition, he's electric. He's really worked on his game to where he's shooting the ball well. I think at the next level, he's going to have a really high ceiling. He's going to have to keep getting better off the ball defensively. Because even last night, I'm watching the Bulls, and their coverages are complex. They're changing up pick and roll. Billy Donovan's the coach, and a really good one at that. And they're trapping, and you've got to, if you're going to trap on the post because of Toronto's size, you better be ready as a help side defender to protect the rim. And those guys are locked into that. I think Jaden off the basketball sometimes can get a little bit preoccupied. Which a lot of really good talented guys can be like that. But if you want to be considered at that level, I think Zach LaVine is a really good example of a guy that he's athletic like Jaden. He's got maybe even more so vertically when he was in his prime. He's got bursts like that. And, he's talked so much about how, and I played with Zach as a rookie. He was really talented, but the game was still very sped up for him. And I would say from a basketball IQ standpoint, he was 19. He hadn't really maybe gone through it, or he hadn't, for whatever reason, it was still coming for him, which is understandable. You're still a kid and you're playing against grown men, but now you watch him and he's making the right play almost every time. And he's credited the fact that he was on that Olympic team with Durant, Draymond Green, all these guys. And he's been like a sponge, and he soaked it up. And now I think he's better as a defender. He's a guy that, boy, he just, if he's guarded, he passes to the open man. If he's not, he scores the ball. And it's a simple concept, but for guys that want to score and have scored their whole lives, it can be a tough deal to kind of transform to that. Etuan is a guy that, if you saw him play in high school, that dude was a freaking scoring machine. And at Purdue, we needed him to score. He would pass, but if he wanted to score that ball, now you watch him, and money can play a part into this. Where you're like, hey, if I do this, I'll make a lot of money. He makes the right play, and it's because he's a smart guy and he understands the game. And I think he has understood that when you play like that, it can only help you. So I think that's kind of Jaden's next step when he gets to the next level is learning from some of these guys and understanding what it is to be a really good pro. For Travion, it's interesting. He's been in a little bit of a slump, I'd say, scoring the ball. But I do think that there is now a place in the NBA for long athletic bigs. And I'm really interested to see kind of how his deal shakes out here. I think he certainly can play in the NBA. I don't know if he'll be drafted, but I do think that he's going to have opportunities because of some of the things he does really well. For Zach, it's such an interesting deal. If it was 1994 and Shaq was roaming the paint and Hakeem Olajuwon was down there, he would be a freaking top 5 pick. Isaac Haas would too, because these teams would be like, we have to have bodies to counter these dudes. And now you just don't see that. The bigs are athletes. They have great length. They protect the rim. Last night Pascal Siakam's playing the 5. He's probably 6'9", but he's got his wingspan of like 7'5". He's a pogo stick getting off the floor. I think Zach is also going to have an opportunity. There are guys, you look at like a Boban Marinovic. I think he's down in Dallas. And Zach has an incredible skill set for his size. He's got good touch. He rebounds outside of his area. I would say better than like an Isaac Haas, who he was getting rebounds only if it was coming right to him. Zach's a really good player. I think for Zach, the only thing I would worry is that the game has changed so much that, will the NBA still, I guess, covet the things that he does extremely well? And NBA teams are still massive, like there are still massive human beings playing in the NBA. But I do think for him, I wish it was 1992 because he'd be a lottery pick and it would be awesome.
Yeah, no question. All right, Rob, thanks so much. You always and always appreciate the time you spend with us. Brian Newbert's got to follow Rob Hummel and he'll do his best he can. And then of course, Tom Dienhart in segment 3, we'll talk a little Purdue football as well. We'll see Rob in Mackey Arena Tuesday, right? For Purdue, Illinois at 9:00. And that will be an interesting one as well. Safe travels. We love your work and we appreciate your time. And we'll look forward to seeing you in Mackey on Tuesday night.
Thanks, Alan.